Good evening, everyone. I'm Bill McDowell, the chair of the Center for Architecture Louis Kahn Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the 32nd Annual Louis I. Kahn Memorial Award and Talk. The Center for Architecture is proud to continue this remembrance of the rich legacy of the educational and architectural leadership of Louis Kahn. His work and teaching had an enormous impact on generations of architects, including my father, and continues to this day. We are thrilled to honor the legacy tonight with a talk by Jeanne Gang, one of the world's leading architects and innovative thinkers. Thank you, Jeanne, for accepting our invitation. I would like to thank our sponsors. This event would not be possible without the generous contributions made by the companies that are listed there and in your program, many of whom have supported this Kahn lecture for numerous years. And these organizations believe in the importance of good design and the improved quality of our built environment. Thank you very much. I would like to specifically mention our lead sponsor this year, John and Patty Gattuso and Liberty Property Trust. John and Liberty Property Trust have been building Philadelphia skyline and the Navy Yard for over 40 years, and we all await the opening of the fantastic new Comcast Technology Center, the latest addition to the Philadelphia skyline, a skyline which has really largely been built by Liberty Property Trust. On behalf of the center, I would like to thank you, John, for your commitment to design excellence and your decades-long support of this event. Patty, thank you very much. John, I just need to ask you, what's next? This event benefits the Charter High School for Architecture and Design, CHAD as it's known, founded in 1999 as a legacy project of the American Institute of Architects Philadelphia chapter. CHAD is a Philadelphia public charter school that utilizes principles of design to engage students. All students take design classes at every grade level. CHAD encourages creative thinking in core subjects as well as in design. CHAD was started by the AIA to introduce awareness of the various design professions to students at an early age. It also set out to introduce potential career paths to an inner city population that is often unaware that these opportunities exist. CHAD is one of the city's most unique schools, and today enrolls 600 students from nearly all zip codes in Philadelphia. CHAD offers 4 majors in architecture, fashion design, industrial design, and graphic design. 50% of the students go on to 4-year degree colleges, significantly higher than the city average. Students are accepted in programs such as RISD, Savannah College of Design, California College of Art, Moore, Philadelphia University, and 2 students are here tonight that are headed to Drexel's Architecture School. I would like to introduce a graduating senior from CHAD, Lamont Lamar, who will briefly describe his experience to you. Lamont?
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Good afternoon. The Charter High School for Architecture and Design is an institution where students are challenged to discover new ways of thinking. The art, architecture, and design and writing, CHAD offers opportunities to those who have none. CHAD is an institution that unleashes their ability to express their character and develop themselves as a creator. I once lived with both of my parents before they separated before I was 14. Their separation forced me to move from a suburban environment in New Jersey to a city that has social injustices that were less of a factor. Inequalities and disadvantages did not affect me until I moved to the city. I was unaware of the disadvantages that inner city students experience. While attending CHAD, I soon realized the priority of many families was not focused on the importance of education. I saw my classmates hungry in the morning because their parents were not around to provide for them. I saw some of my students sleep in class because they had to go to work at 11 p.m. Their lives were driven on survival, not education. CHAD invites students from all parts of the city to a non-traditional way of learning through the design process. When students are introduced to real-life architects and designers, I've heard they're really fascinated. Chad guided me through the talent of creating. I was introduced to an organization called Philadelphia Community Art Access Media, where I became fascinated by cinematography. And that developed my passion for film and media. Film allows me to capture my story, but also capture the narratives of people that don't have a voice. As a future designer and filmmaker, I wish to move people emotionally through my films and open their eyes to things they've never imagined. Chad teaches technical and creative skills inside and outside the classroom. We work with professional environments and professional design programs. All students graduate with industry learning skills. I've had the opportunity to work at Eaton Cole to create a holiday card that was mass-produced and sent to clients internationally. The students that study architecture and visit construction sites, such as fashion outlets and the bridge, work alongside architects in the field. Our fashion program is led by a former industry designer of Tommy Hilfiger, Ms. Dia Stevens. She brought her insight for fashion, the fashion world, to Chad. The interactive design course collaborated with the University of Pennsylvania to work with 3D printing, a tool that most students will have to wait till higher education to experience. Outside of the design department, there are courses like the maritime physics, which take place at the Seaport Museum. This course was formed to extend the physics instructions in a boat building workshop. We as students are fortunate to be offered so many different courses. Chad has taught me how to persevere since freshman year. I've stayed up many nights to meet deadlines, work on design projects, and complete a portfolio that would end up I would be using for college. Chad is unique, not a traditional high school, with design studio courses that have prepared me to attend California College of the Arts for a full ride. While attending Chad, I particularly enjoyed being surrounded by students and teachers that shared the same similar creative abilities. But more importantly, when we come together as a community we make up the Charter High School for Architecture and Design. And thank you.
And now to make the introduction of our honoree tonight, I would like to introduce Fritz Steiner, the Dean and Paley Professor of the University of Pennsylvania's School of Design. Thank you.
Good evening. As Dean of Penn's School of Design, I meet designers at various levels and various stages in their design education. And from students who are just graduating and coming to college to distinguished professors who have spent decades of practice. What they have in common is a recognition that our shared built environment has the ability, and I would argue the responsibility, to positively impact all people's lives, not just those with the most financial resources. Tonight, I'm honored to introduce an architect who fulfills those values through her thoughtful, innovative designs, from cultural institutions and residential towers to reimagining our civic commons, and how public spaces can be better designed to serve all. Jeanne Gang is recognized internationally for a design process that foregrounds the relationships between individuals, communities, and environments. Drawing insight from ecological systems, her analytical and creative approach has produced some of today's most compelling design work, including the Aqua Tower in Chicago, Illinois, the Writers Theater in Glencoe, Illinois, the Arca Center for Social Justice Leadership in Kalamazoo, Michigan, a 2011 MacArthur Fellow, and a recipient of the 2013 Cooper Hewitt National Design Award in Architecture. Jeanne Gang was named the 2016 Architect of the Year in Architect Review's Women in Architects Award. An alumna of Harvard University's Graduate School of Design, Jeanne has most recently taught at Harvard, Columbia, and Rice universities, where her studios have explored how architecture can better connect people with each other and their greater environment towards addressing the challenges of this century. Jeanne and Studio Gang are currently designing major projects throughout the Americas and Europe. A couple of these include the expansion of the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, the new United States Embassy in Brasilia, Brazil, and a unified campus for the California College of Arts in San Francisco. A kind of nice symmetry there. Intertwined with her built work, Studio Gang it also develops research and related publications, exhibits, and programming that push design's ability to create public awareness and lead to change, a practice that Jeanne calls actionable idealism. A couple of the examples of these include the Pulse Station, an ongoing project exploring how American police stations can be reimagined through an inclusive design process to better serve their communities. Reverse Effect, an advocacy publication produced to spark greener future for the Chicago River, and an interactive installation for the National Building Museum, which will be open at the block party this summer. We're all in for a great treat. In addition to being an amazing, innovative architect, Jeanne Gang is a terrific speaker. So please welcome Jeanne Gang.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and it's such an honor to be here and to receive this award and to be able to address you in this space. It's incredible. Tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about this award. Made me reflect a little bit on the way that I got the office started and the way that I've designed my practice. And I thought I'd give you a kind of a full range of the different kinds of things that we're up to at Studio Gang. Mostly it's very much like Lamar said. It's staying up late at night, working on design projects, and preparing your portfolio. It's what we do. But the office has grown over the years. It started with just one person, me, in a loft space. It's kind of grown up to really be about making. We have a space where we really can expand out and use all the resources. But it's also about this culture of the office and a kind of camaraderie that we create with each other to enjoy and to experience life. Because I think that's connecting to the way people live is really an important part of being an architect. You have to understand how people connect to each other and to their environment around them. We now are in New York with, I think, 25 people there, and in Chicago. This is our space in Chicago in the former Polish National Alliance building. And what's really interesting is kind of growing the office in a way that's very thoughtful and not just an expansion. We needed a model, and a lot of the consultants we had coaching, like here's how you can expand your practice. They had great ideas, but some of it just didn't feel like it quite fit us, and especially the pyramid with the top down. So one of the things we designed was we collaborated together to create our office organization chart, which is more like a tree where the values are the roots. And the great thing about turning the pyramid upside down is just that it means that everybody in the office is really a branch or trunk supporting someone else that's new. And then the new people coming in might bring in, like leaves, bringing in great ideas and new thoughts and ideas. So it's like this living organism. It's very flexible, great. I highly recommend this org chart. So one of the early projects I started on, really, I was very interested in materials. I think this connects me to Louis Kahn in a certain way. This is a marble curtain that I designed very early in my practice for the National Building Museum, and it was a project that we were asked by the International Masonry Institute to come up with new ways to use stone. And there were 4 different materials: stone, masonry, terrazzo, and then a newer material, AAC concrete. And so I was assigned stone. Stanley Tigerman was the curator. And of course, I found out right away that the gallery could not support very much load. So you had stone, and then, the assignment was almost impossible. So I noticed the arched ceiling and thought maybe we could think about if we could put stone into tension. So I know Louis Kahn asked the brick what it wanted to be, but with the stone, it was like, I'm sure it would not have wanted to be cut into thin strips, slathered with resin, and turned into a puzzle and hung from the ceiling. But that's kind of what we had in mind for it. And so in order to test the possibilities for stone in tension, we actually had to pull it apart. And this is a picture from down in the basement of IIT, where I was teaching at the time, where the material scientists told us it's never going to work. That stone just can't do that. It's going to break at 100 pounds. But after we started doing these tests, we found out some stone does perform better than others in tension. And the particular kind of marble actually took 1,750 pounds. And that was enough to make our engineers comfortable that this stone could actually be hung in tension, one from another, in these kind of geodesic chains coming from the ceiling. And here you can see how thin it is. These are stone tiles, 3/8 of an inch thick, in a puzzle shape that allows these chains to hang down and be supported from the ceiling. They're actually, the first row at the very top is aluminum, and then they hang down after that. So it was a really great experience to just have an assignment that didn't have a program and just experiment with this material. But it also meant that we had to be ready to fail, because we were going far down this line. If it didn't work, it would be a failure. And so it taught me a lot of things about materials, but also just this. It reinforced my real desire to have a practice that could address these kinds of questions, at the same time doing projects for clients, but also having this kind of ongoing research agenda that allows us to experiment and to make things that maybe don't have a purpose, but that will someday, I believe, come and be important to us. At the same time, I've always been someone who is really interested and connected to environment and environmental climate issues. And as I moved to Chicago to start my practice, having worked in Europe, I discovered this disturbed landscape. I think maybe in Philadelphia there's some places like this too, with post-industrial wetlands that in this view with invasive species, and the mountain back is actually a landfill. It's very flat in Chicago, but this topography is actually created from waste. But it intrigued me in that there were a lot. It's an environment that supports a lot of biodiversity, oddly enough. And so over the years, another vein of the research has really been on these waterways and spaces in the post-industrial landscape. We produced a book called Reverse Effect that explored the results of the reversal of the Chicago River, which I don't know if people know the story, but originally the river was flowing into the Great Lakes, Great Lake Michigan, and about 100 years ago they reversed that flow to take the waste and pollution downstream. But today we have these issues like, well, first of all, it's not that great to just flush your pollution downstream, but also water quality and flooding, and then there's also this danger of these invasive carp coming up the Mississippi and making their way into the Great Lakes. So the river has a lot of issues, but it also has great potential. As you can see in the lower left, this former industrial space that was a privately held edges of the river could now somehow become a place for the city to make public space or to give people access to the waterways. So in Chicago, when we were doing the book, we started interviewing all the people that were using the river, even though it was polluted. People that were rowing, people that were fishing on it, people that were using it for tourism. And we decided to do a publication that would help the public knowledge about the river, the conditions of the river, and to see what the future could be if it were to change. And so we took these images and helped by talking to engineers. I think architects are very good at like kind of connecting technical information to making it understandable. We showed how the river could one day be disengaged from this reversal, and that our wastewater could be renewed and returned back cleaned and returned back to the lakes. In this book, there was a series of steps to follow, and the first number one step was for the city, like, hey, let's get some of the control along this river's edge and bring it back into public use. The reason being is if people can access the river, that's the only way that they are going to be able to care about it. Sure enough, we got a new mayor in the city who took a look at this book. I think he probably heard it from other people too, but he really embraced the idea of making this river the new recreational frontier for the city. And so Mayor Emanuel planned 4 new boathouses along the river, and we actually got to do 2 of these boathouses. The first one on the north side, in a place that was a former industrial space, and we had a very limited time, a very small budget, and we designed a boathouse that could also be used in the winter for training. And these couple of clubs that were already rowing on the river, this is now their home. They also use these indoor tanks for training, and different groups like disabled veterans are also learning how to row, because rowing is really something that helps you prepare, be a good team member, helps you like mentally and physically. This is the one that we just finished over the winter, as you can see, yeah, on the south side, and this will they start using this in the spring, like now, for rowing on the south side of Chicago. And so what really makes me excited is seeing that this once abandoned riverfront is now really an active place for engagement and for youth in the city to be able to use it. For the architecture, it really was important for us to make something exciting, I think. We were interested in using the motion of these oars as a prompt. We looked at the whole flow of the oar and turned it into kind of this roof form, using straight members like the oars, but creating this up and down truss system that gives you a really dynamic roof form, but also allows daylight in to warm the space. This is during construction. Very simple construction. You can see it's nothing fancy and very affordable, but creating this space that really celebrates this opening of the river. And so it's been amazing to see this come alive and be one of the first steps. And now the city is also doing things downtown as well along the riverfront and really trying to turn it into some big asset. I think this could be happening in Philadelphia as well. One more research trajectory, I think, along the lines of climate. Oftentimes we'll do some of this research and contribute to books. This was a book from Columbia that we were a contributing essay to. We'll come across topics that are somehow not exactly related to architecture but tangent, and then want to follow up on those things, and they kind of filter into our projects over time. this was really about kind of discovering the work of Maria Tharp, who was an oceanographer. She was working at Columbia, and she had this theory that the ocean, the ground under the water was almost like mountainous, and at the time everybody thought that was very crazy, but what she was doing was plotting this data from soundings. Because she was a woman, she was not allowed to go onto the boats and study the ocean, so she relied on this data, and she created this incredible drawing and map panorama of the underneath side. So I think, like today, it would be interesting. Now we have a flow. We have all kinds of measuring tools for our cities and for oceans. And so one of the things we've been working on is helping scientists to take some of this flow of data, so much of this data, and create drawings and diagrams that help them explain the ideas. So in this case, we've been working with a group called the Ocean Solutions, and basically layering their 2D data that they've been collecting onto 3D models and helping them to express their findings. So it's not exactly architecture, but it does those things. Having space for that time to explore is really important to our practice. One of the projects I wanted to show tonight is called the Arca Center for Social Justice Leadership. And this is a small project that's 10,000 square feet in Kalamazoo, Michigan. There's a small college campus there. The pink dot is where the building is located. And they really wanted, they have a strong social justice leadership program on this campus, and they wanted us to design a building that could both fit into the campus but also be the first ever kind of building that's about social justice. The campus has some traditional brick buildings and some maybe postmodern brick buildings as well on campus. But it really felt awkward to try to think about using brick in this case, given these colonial or aspect of the design of these buildings, and that the client really wanted something new. Because there was no precedent for a social justice center, we just started to study the space where social justice happens in cities. And what we found was it happens in the streets and the plazas and spaces like that. That's the demonstrations that are a result of so much planning. And then we found that there are buildings that are community centers that are kind of almost like spaces where these ideas can hatch and plan. They're spaces that promote communication and conversations. And we found these all over the world. The one on the upper left is a meeting space for the elders in Mali, and it has a very low ceiling so that everyone stays seated and calm, and you can't lose your temper and stand up. And so what we did was we took these qualities, we looked at the qualities of the hearth and the qualities of skylights, and brought these together into a building plan. This is the plan. It's like a three wings. Each one of these ends of the wings has very open and views to the campus and the surroundings. And at the center, there's both a hearth and a kitchen. And that was something that we heard from all the faculty there. They said, what really breaks down boundaries is like preparing food with each other, and to sit around a hearth so the neighbors can be invited in. And it really wasn't very easy to get a fireplace, a working fireplace, and a kitchen in this academic building, but because it was so central to this idea of social justice and creating these relationships, we were able to get it through. And so now the space can work for small groups and large groups. They have seminars there, they have conferences, and they have faculty spaces for work and classes. It was really an amazing project to work on. It was fun to try to understand what it means to be a space for social justice leadership. And so we really wanted it to be light and airy, and these are all things that came out of intense research on what social justice could be. these are the views out of the three ends. But one of the things that was interesting in terms of the materiality was as we were driving to Michigan for some of our trips, we came across, there were these amazing forests that are sustainably harvested. This is a white cedar forest that they grow white cedar, which is very resistant to rot and resistant to insects. And we stumbled upon this barn and some other buildings that were done with this incredible, like a wood masonry. And some people call it cordwood masonry. And we started to wonder, like, what if we could revive that technique for this building? Because it really is kind of like, it represents this idea of coming together with neighbors to build a structure and a really strong community. Lo and behold, we found this couple who, Rob Roy and Jackie Roy, who actually knew how to build saunas out of this technique. And they were going around and doing little workshops with people to saunas. So we asked them to come and teach us and our contractors, masons, how to do a cordwood masonry wall. The beauty of this wall is that it's really sequestering the carbon. So if you think about a tree growing up, it's absorbing carbon through its entire life. And then what you do is just dry this wood out. Actually, we dried out the wood for a year prior to putting it into the wall. So there's very little fabrication energy put into this wood. It goes right into the wall. Aesthetically, we tweaked it and really got it into this beautiful, almost fabric-like quality. And then you can see here, so that it becomes a place, it's like taking cars off the road to build a wall like this. So it's a technique that even though it was old, it was like, wow, this is so contemporary and something that could really help us understand how a building could be greener. And it ages too, as beautiful weathering to this material, and it really has a quality that connects it both to the brick campus, I think, but also makes something new. And now people are really, this campus has really grown in terms of their number of events that they hold for social justice leadership. They are really thriving as a school. And it's because of place, that there's a place that they can gather, and it's a place that has an identity, and no longer having to plan these things in the basement of a school where they used to be. So it was about creating relationships and basing the design on that. In terms of tall buildings, they're oftentimes thought of as structures that are isolated or sometimes, off-putting, let's say, for community purposes. But we've been really interested in how tall buildings can also create community, because they are, it's really the future. We need to make denser, more compact cities. So how can we encourage community on these tall buildings? With the Aqua Tower, we were really interested there in kind of like using the materials, the concrete, in a way that would be giving a benefit to the apartments and giving terraces so people could step outside and even see their neighbor. We tested this in wind tunnels and found that the variations that we were showing in the slabs were actually reducing the discomfort of the wind. In other words, you can use the balcony for a longer period of time in the year. And it was really based on this idea of using that space outside the building for social purposes, for connecting to the environment, connecting to the neighbors, and not thinking of a tall building as just like, a stacked place for privacy, which was really, kind of the feedback that we were originally given. And we said, maybe these offsets of these balconies could also allow you to have sight lines to your neighbors. So it turns out that this building is really, it attracts a lot of extroverts, let's just say. So yeah, it's like people that want to be out in the city. There's a lot of students from the University of Chicago Business School that live there, empty nesters, people moving back in the city. But one of the things that let's say I wanted to do better on was the performance of the building. Even though it's a LEED certified building and it has pretty good performance, one of the issues is like how to, maybe the slabs could be disengaged from the inside. So on the next building, we tried to find ways to improve the performance and also to continue to think about the social qualities. I mean, not everyone's an extrovert. Some people are introverts, and we wanted to make a building that could be used by both people. So this building, it's got a plan that on the north side, this is down in Hyde Park, with a southern neighborhood of Chicago that has views of the skyline. So on the north side of the building, you have this like bay windows that you can look out of, and on the south side, a really active balcony structure. So I think with the tall buildings in these residential buildings, we've really been interested in how to make them more social. Here you can see the structure of the building. So these offset concrete panels, which are the columns of the building, but also they are, let's see if I can use this, they allow us to eliminate columns on these bay windows. So you can see that the slab here is picked up by the panel here, but it's also hung from this panel, so decreasing the span and allowing us to go column-free on the bays. But also the key thing is it is the structure, so it's impossible to value engineer it out. So you can see the detail of this. So this building went on a site that was a former strip mall, but now it has co-working space, it has a Whole Foods market, it has retail space, and then on top of the plinth, there's some social space for the building, and then rental apartments above that. And so from the south side, you can see these, what we call balcony stems. And the idea is that they take the gravity loads all the way down to the ground, but then there's an array of these stacked, almost like cards, stacked up that create this very dynamic outdoor space. So you can see in this image the loads being taken down to the ground on the green stem. That's one of the stems. And what this does is it allows us to disengage the slab on the inside of the building from the slab on the outside of the building, so it can improve performance. Anyway, that's what we're testing on this building. I'm not 100% convinced it does improve the performance that much, but that was the concept of it. And you can see this incredible, almost Escher-esque, like spaces that are quite amazing in there. You can't look into someone else's apartment, but you can see them if they're out on the balcony. So we really treated this as like a kind of a threshold space. And here is installing the thermal break, which is the first time it's ever been done in Chicago, by the way. So we were really pushing for that on this project, and luckily we were able to get it installed and also install sensors so we can do a comparison of the performance of, I don't know if everybody knows what I'm talking about, it's like a technical thing, but it's when you have a slab inside and the slab outside to reduce the heat loss. So on the introvert side of the building, this is what it looks like inside. Oops, there. Those are and my friends, the introverts. And then on the extrovert side, you have these three-dimensional spaces, and people can really hang out. And you can see people here just going on out to the balcony to see everyone else and see and be seen. But it really is a pretty dynamic facade, I have to say. But this is an ordinary building. It is not an expensive building. It's regular apartments. I've always felt like architects need to put our attention somewhat on living space in the city, because it is the DNA of a city. But normally these kind of buildings are really very basic and not very exciting. So I'm happy to always be working on projects that I think will improve the city. This is one of them that's again, it's not a very expensive building. In fact, it was stalled after the 2008 downturn, and then suddenly it came back and turned from condos to apartments. Community is really important to us. I think more and more with these larger scale projects, like how to break down that scale and bring people together. At the University of Chicago, it was a competition that we won and built, but it was really their idea to kind of help students adjust to university life in those first years and to create residence halls that could support friendships and mentoring and basically improve performance for the students. And so this is an 800-bed residence hall and dining commons. The university is located on the south side of Chicago. Here you can see the skyline, and this was our site. And you can see the fabric. There's this beautiful collegiate Gothic fabric, but it's known for being cloistered and not super connected to the neighborhood around it. And so the university wanted to change that and to start to make a connection to the neighborhoods that surround the university. So we really looked at what was going on in the space and looked around at the existing architecture to find that, wow, there's already all these portals. Even this is Edward Larrabee Barnes' Smart Museum. There's modern portals and older portals, places to enter into the campus. However, all of them had these gates on them that kind of could be closed down. So what we proposed was a series of these slender bar buildings that allowed you to walk underneath and come right into the campus North Commons on grade without any gates, and to invite people in from the neighborhood and from the public. And so in scale-wise, this big wider boulevard on the north with the tallest building and stepping down to the more residential scale. So this is the picture of like the portal and the plaza that's on the portal and how you enter in now to the campus center. And these bars create like a little semi-private courtyards above here, which is, it's a garden on the second floor where students can have some space that's a little bit more private, but not gated or anything. So it became a project about these different scales of community. Everything from the dining commons itself and these courtyards to places, these commons where parents can come and visit, and all the way up into these house hubs. This is looking at the portal as you enter into the campus and under these columns. This is the dining commons, which is really almost like Harry Potter-esque with these long tables. But it's also a place that everyone can come and eat. And so people from the neighborhood could come in, the people that work there can eat there, and they do. And it's a really beautiful light-filled space with these grill screens that help shade from the sun. So everybody comes in to one entrance for this project, so 800 students, and they can either take the elevator, go up the stairs, and then they can communicate across to any of the towers. But the DNA of the project is really about this house hub idea. This is the house, this is showing 2 house hubs, you know, and the idea of it was there's got to be a space where this 100 students, the university system of 100 students, can get together and create these social relationships. And so we created this staggered section, so you have sight lines between 3 levels, and it's almost like a townhouse inserted into the fabric of the tower. And that place is where everyone from that house can gather and have study rooms, they can cook together. And that patterning ended up migrating and informing the facades of the buildings. This is an early model. This was the model from the competition. This is also another model. And now today, this is the space. Of course, it's really clean because we took the pictures on like day one and they had to move in on day two. But it's, hopefully they have already taken over the space and really made it their own. So each one has a little bit different character. And that will allow people to gather together and to, you know, to bond over the years. We had the idea of the performance for this building is really to have a window that can open 100% and get 100% fresh air in the space. So the grill acts as a safety protection, but it allows you to open all the way up. And then we tune the facades based on the orientation. And it's really interesting because there's no ductwork here. We're doing a radiant system. It's really energy efficient, and all the students can compete from the different houses on how to reduce energy. So that was our rendering, and then we did get one little snap of a picture of actually someone starting to move in, but I think the grill and the pattern that creates on the floor is really lovely, and it's with this nice big windows. The exterior really connects it to this, in a modern way, to the collegiate Gothic. We used precast panels, 3-story high, and the ones on the taller building are curvilinear. But it was fun to work with depth and solids because, you know, that's really how we got our performance for this building. This is the dining commons from the outside. So I showed this, you know, to talk about these scales of community, and I think it's really a starting point for us on most of our projects nowadays. And one project that really demonstrates it in an interesting way is this Writers Theater project, which we recently completed just last year. It's a theater in Glencoe, Illinois. It's a 250-seat thrust stage and a black box, a rehearsal space, and some associated program. And the theater company really started inside the back of a library. They had one space in the back of a bookshop, and then this other space they were sharing with the Ladies Library Club. But they are a very highly regarded theater company, and they wanted to make a new home. So our site here's Lake Michigan, a kind of sleepy little village that, you know, had this incredible theater there, but when people went to the theater and were presented with these really intense, you know, plays and that brought up all kinds of things, from politics to life and death, there was no place to go afterwards and talk about it. And so the artistic director really wanted to create a theater that could be more about the community. We researched a lot. We had done some performance space, but not specifically this type of theater. And we were really interested in how there were eras where theater didn't have buildings. It was out in the street, or during Shakespeare's time with the Globe and other courtyards, it was really kind of part semi-open and part of the community. And so they called these in-yard theaters. It's really interesting because this era corresponds with the birth of what we think of as modern theater, Shakespeare. And it also represents architecture that was the first time using wood as a frame. So prior to this, there were masonry bearing wall structures, but in England, as they started to deforest the forests, they were able to use wood and infill with wattle and daub to create Tudor architecture. So it was a kind of a way where there was some worry about putting a modern structure into Glencoe, but because we kind of landed on this idea of the connection between wood and theater, we were able to convince our client and our community that a space surrounded by wood and plaster would actually be, you know, in keeping. And so we wanted to use wood in a really new way. And we created the two venues, and then the lobby is actually almost like this third venue where after the theater, you can go hang out and talk about what you saw. So in plan, it's this thrust stage, black box, rehearsal space, and then this is a lobby that doubles as a community meeting space, a performance space, really serves a lot of different purposes. And on the second level, there's a walkabout, similar to what we saw in the in-yard theaters. Here's some more research about like wood construction, and as we moved through the design process, we really wanted to push the limits of the new ways of using timber, which is either in laminated form but here in tension. Again, tension. Tension makes things thin and light, and it's a beautiful thing to see a structure in tension. So what happens is these Vierendeel trusses and the wood spanning over the top then hang down, and the idea was to hang this walkway around. Really, at this point, I realized that the engineer I had was specialized in concrete, and I really needed a wood engineer. And so it just was an incredible way of finding the ecology of the team as well, like who could work together with each other to solve this problem. Wood was not allowed to be used in this way for the structure. And so we needed to show that it could be done. This is a detail at the bottom we call the cat's paw. And it's a brilliant way of holding in tension. You can see this cavity, adding wood into the strand, the batten of wood to give it more mass instead of putting a bolt through it, which would take away mass. We also had to find the people that could do this. I mean, it's not usual kind of work that you would get from a carpentry shop these days. And we discovered this guild out in the middle of Illinois called Trillium Dell, and this is their site. And some of the work that they do is to disassemble barns and to salvage the wood, and they're really brilliant, a very international group located out here. And they helped us to mock up and test. So this was like a rig to pull these battens apart, and we were able to show that it could do what it needed to do, and passed the test and was approved to use it in Glencoe. And that's the lightweight engineer, Peter Heppel, there, and our team on the rig. The good thing was the wood never broke, and then the rig started to almost break, so we stopped the test at that point. But here is the way that the glue laminated wood are routed out to accept the cat's paw, and this shows putting the wood into the cat's paw, into this mold, the flare, which ends up like this. I learned a lot too, and they let us make some of these things, which is really cool to be an architect and be able to participate a bit. I also learned how to throw an axe when I was out there, because that's what you do for fun in the middle of Illinois in the middle of the winter. Then it started to come together, and you can see the cat's paws coming in, and how this is attached at the top. This had to be straight so you could get the piece in, and you could see and just feel the hanging of this walkway that gives the theater its identity. Here you can see the other benefit of having the Vierendeels and so on is just how light this all is. There's no additional structure needed because this is all hanging from the top. So we have these doors that can open up onto the park, and hopefully sometime in the future, the artistic director will be able to do one of those parades, the pageantry that starts in the city and ends up inside. We used a lot of the wood that was on the site. We did mill that and use that for the interiors. This is the lobby space that you can see, and here it is with the doors open. We also made sure this space was usable for performance, so it has lighting and acoustically treated, etc. And then across from the walkabout, there's a kind of a meeting space where the ladies' library club can still meet, and there's a rehearsal space, and then this is the thrust stage with the brick that was on the former building on the site was reused to create an acoustic wall with this pattern. And that was a whole nother story that I won't get into with the masons who didn't think they could do it, and they did it, and they were so excited. So, the rest I'm going to show just quickly a few projects, not too in depth, but just some of the ways that we're trying to think about each project. Different scales, different programs, and this one is the research actually for solar carved building that we're currently under construction in New York. When I was in grad school, I came across this book by Ralph Knowles, who was a professor at USC, so didn't really have a connection to him in any way, but I thought the book was fascinating, and he was talking about how you could shape buildings to make the space around the building more comfortable for the neighbors, and to have a kind of, like, you could have a solar zoning code that would help shape cities. And I just thought it was fascinating. I ended up going to a conference, and I made an appointment and met with him and talked about this concept. And I always had it in the back of my mind, and then we came across this project in New York, and it seemed to apply. This is a 1908 zoning ordinance in New York that determined that all the buildings would be these step-back skyscrapers. And the whole purpose of it was to preserve light and air to the city public space and street, which is really great. This is our building, which when you look at it, you might think, wow, that looks the opposite of solar carved, but it's actually designed specifically for its place to benefit the space around it. So in the New York Code, you get this zoning envelope. I'm sure you've seen it before, and it produces a certain footprint. Our site happens to be along the High Line, which is this green line here. This is the Standard Hotel, and it happens to be along the Hudson River in New York, in Manhattan. If we would build as of right, we would be able to do this L shape, and it would really crowd out the High Line, which is interesting because, in fact, it is a public space, but it's unusual because it's in the middle of the block. And so what we discovered was that, maybe we need to respect the light and air to the High Line in this case, seeing as our site is right along the river. And so we went after an idea of replacing volume from here, cutting it back and doing a higher building, and then going about carving it with the angles of the sun. And so that people walking on the High Line would still be able to have views to the river, and then these other carves would begin to reduce the amount of shade on the High Line. So by doing this, we are able to preserve 200 more hours of daylight to the High Line, during the growing months. And so the city, when we presented it, because it was, we needed a variance, they saw the logic and they approved it. So it was really great. It was, and we had these different variations. The more we're trying to get as much FAR we could, but if we ended up going down, we would just increase these carves. And so we're really excited to see this building come around. These are some of the studies about this faceted portion where we carved out the building to make it more special in those areas. And so this is under construction now and should be finished next year, so really exciting. And finally, I wanted to talk about how the research takes us into areas in our cities to understand relationships between people. This project it's the last project I'm going to show. It's really about responding to a couple of things that were happening around us and wanting to see if architecture could somehow have some positive contribution. We were designing a fire rescue building in Brooklyn, New York, and with what I noticed with the fire rescue team and the rescue workers is that they always had like a kind of a very strong relationship to the neighborhood around them. Everybody loved them, and they like each other too. And so the building, doing the fire rescue building, got me thinking about like police stations. Why are they so different? Why do they look like fortresses? And also what the tension, obviously the terrible confrontations between police and community members is a symptom of something that is gone wrong in the relationship. And so we started to think about like what a new police station could be, and if it would somehow be different than what we currently have. And we used this points that came out of a study, the 21st century community policing, and there were like these different pillars that addressed all of the things that need to reform in policing. And so we just took each of the pillars and tried to see if it could be something physical, a spatial element, and if it could be, applied to a police station. Again, research, we found that police didn't really ever start with buildings. They used to go around and be on a watch in the neighborhood where they lived, and they had these little warming shelters, but they were members of the community, and they took turns patrolling and watching out for safety. And over time, what happened was the introduction of the car came along, and you see they still have these like call boxes here in Trenton, New Jersey, and then they stopped walking around the neighborhoods and they started using cars. And so that's one of the things that we think changed the way that policing is done. This is a diagram of an earlier fabric where people were walking, and this is a diagram of a current police station, one in Chicago in North Lawndale, that's surrounded by parking, of huge roadways, pretty much standing off away from the community. And so this separation, we think, is part of the problem. And this is some of the research that we did on the history of policing, which is very complex, especially in America, different in the East and North, from the South, from the West. So we kind of focused in on the Chicago station and found that, most of them were fortress-like and really keeping people away. Chicago did this thing where 15 years ago they started building prototypes, new police stations, which were all pretty much identical, but they didn't really ask the communities what they wanted in their community. They just used the prototype throughout. And so when we looked at our site, we thought, and this is a hypothetical site that we thought, let's test out some of these ideas. We found that we wanted to connect with the community that lived there, but also with the police. So what could they have in common? If we asked them what they would put in their police station to make it possible for the police and community members to have better relationships, what would they say? And this was one of the meetings that we had, so both police and community members participating. And what came out of it was really interesting. These are all like architects from our office and engaging with people and drawing what they were saying, not what we thought. And one of the cool things was people came up with ideas like, well, if you really want police and community members to talk to each other, we need to have a barbershop in the space. But also like computer lab for learning. A lot of the stuff was like really great. And could you imagine having these things on the public side of the station and really start to make these more opportunities for people to meet each other? So you would have a police station going from something like this to having this kind of openness on the public side of the station. We also applied these ideas to the neighborhood itself. And one of the things that happened was we found that both the cops and the kids like sports. That's a good way to connect. And they had all this extra parking, so we thought of like introducing sports courts on the parking. And it was interesting because we were able to raise money, private money, to install and build a half court on this police parking lot in so little time. It was, everyone really looking for solutions. And when we started out, the neighbors were saying, well, I don't know if the kids will use that because it's too close to the police station. And this is just on the opening day. We went back a year later and asked people, and we found out that this court is being used a lot, and actually the cops now have basketballs inside the station kids can borrow, and once in a while an officer joins in. Small steps, but an idea about how to create community and to use architecture to build trust. So in the future, maybe like you would go into the station and you could have services, other services, city services. There could be a barbershop, a community room, Wi-Fi, and things that would just make it a public building that it is on the public side of the station. A lot of people ask me, like, how did you come up with these things, or how do you go about your research? So because our office is really focused on process, we always try to diagram it. In this case, it looks something like this. But there was academic input of scholars that are looking at these issues, community leaders that we engage with, community members, government people, especially in the parks districts, and then the police themselves, as well as philanthropic donors, and to come up with an idea that's what we call actionable idealism, like something that is idealistic, but let's get it built and start testing it, measuring it. So since that time, we've started to think about all public buildings as these potential, community generators, and we've started working in a number of cities, one of them in Southwest Philly, to look and analyze some of the existing public buildings and how these things could be networked together and to make a stronger communities. And so other things, things I have on the boards to just show you and to wrap it up right now. We're working on the American Museum of Natural History in New York. It's a new wing to, again, this is very important project to bring science and introduce science to youth and all the way up to PhD levels to get people excited about science. We're turning a former powerhouse on the Rock River into a new health and recreation center, believe it or not, for Beloit College. Working on some taller buildings, residential and mixed-use buildings. This is in San Francisco on Folsom Street in the Trans Bay area. And then I've got one building under construction right now in Chicago that will be taller than the Aqua Tower. So this is going to be, I never remember the number of how many feet it is, but the guys in my office always remember. So I always ask them, but it's 1,113 feet or something like that. And that is a really interesting building in that at the base it really connects people to the river. And we're also doing some work with a Sweetwater Foundation in Chicago, which is an urban agriculture group in the Washington Park area. And we are working on our culture and our office. And I wish all of my team could have been here tonight to listen to the lecture and to join in the conversation, but that's us. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeanne. That was fantastic. I had the great fortune of going to the Architectural Biennial in Chicago 2 years ago and saw the Polis station. And as someone who has worked in community development in the city, I was like, this is amazing. So I'm so thankful that you're here tonight. I want to thank everyone for coming this evening. My name is Rebecca Johnson. I'm Executive Director of AIA Philadelphia and the Center for Architecture and Design. This event is a really important event for the center to do public programming about the importance of the built environment and how architecture and designers can really inspire us to think differently about our cities and our world. We do this through events like tonight, and on Thursday there is an exhibit that Jeanne Gang worked very hard on about the Writers' Theater. So come by the center. It'll be up for 6 weeks or more or less. So I hope you get to check that out. We couldn't do any of this without our sponsors. So once again, thank you everyone on this for helping us make this event possible. I also want to thank a few people, to the man who makes this evening happen year after year, our Center Louis Kahn Memorial Committee Chair, Bill McDowell. Bill's commitment to this program makes it one of our marquee events, and it just keeps getting better year after year, so thank you very much, Bill. I also want to thank David Bender, who our Associate Director of the Center, and Liz Paul, our Communications Director. They really helped bring this all together, so thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce you to our board chair, Rich Davies from Powell, Trackman, Logan, Carl, and Lombardo, who will present Jeanne with this year's Louis I. Kahn Memorial Award. We're supposed to move to the center.
I will. Well, thank you, Rebecca. This is a privilege for me. Some of you may know that I'm not a lawyer, and so it's a real thrill to give someone a prize whose approach is actionable idealism, since mine seems to be perpetual pessimism. With that, on behalf of the Center for Architecture, I'm pleased to present you with the 2017 Louis I. Kahn Memorial Award, and an honor for your distinguished achievements in architecture and for your contribution to the storied legacy of Louis Kahn this evening with your presentation. Again, it's been a great privilege. Congratulations, Jeanne Gang.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. That's it. Thank you.